On a stormy night, a quiet waitress named Lena spots an elderly man slip and fall just inside the restaurant where she works. While others hesitate, Lena rushes to his aid, not knowing this simple act of kindness will change her life forever. She offers him warmth, food, and dignity, never once asking who he is or what he's doing there. But the man returns the next day, and the next, always watching, always quiet. What Lena doesn't know is that this unassuming stranger is actually the secret owner of the restaurant chain, Edward Thomas, testing the heart of his staff from the shadows. And Lena, the soft-spoken, overlooked employee, is about to become the center of a story that turns kindness into a powerful force for change. In a world where ambition often overshadows empathy, one woman's selfless actions ripple far beyond her imagination. From a humble waitress to a rising star, and finally to a nurse devoted to helping others, Lena's journey is proof that doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, can lead to unexpected miracles. Stay with us as we uncover how a single fall sparked a chain reaction that revealed true character, tested loyalty, and quietly transformed lives. The rain came down in thick, cold sheets, smearing the glow of neon signs outside the little corner restaurant known as Willow and Hearth. The wind howled through the narrow streets, rattling the windows and driving customers inside in small, damp waves. Inside the cozy dining room, warm yellow lights reflected off polished wooden tables. Soft jazz trickled from a corner speaker, mixing with the clatter of dishes and murmurs of conversation. It was just past 8 p.m., and the dinner rush had slowed to a crawl. A few lingering patrons sipped their drinks, finishing desserts or half-heartedly checking their phones. The staff, tired from a long shift, had begun the subtle dance of closing, stacking chairs in the far section, polishing silverware, pretending not to glance at the clock. At the far end of the room, near the kitchen doors, a slender woman moved with quiet efficiency. Lena had been working at Willow and Hearth for over a year, but to most, she remained an enigma. She was polite, efficient, and almost impossibly calm under pressure. She spoke little, smiled often, and worked like clockwork. Some called her timid, others simply forgot she was there, but she never seemed to mind. Wiping down a recently vacated table, Lena glanced toward the door just as it swung open violently with a blast of cold air. A tall figure staggered in, his overcoat dripping, his steps unsteady. He looked more like a stray than a customer, soaked through, silver hair plastered to his forehead, glasses fogged. In the same second she registered his presence, he slipped. The thud echoed through the dining room. Conversations halted. A couple gasped. A server peeked out from the kitchen, brows furrowed, but no one moved, except Lena. She dropped the cloth and rushed across the floor, kneeling beside the man just as he struggled to push himself up. "Sir, are you okay?" Her voice was soft but steady. Up close she could see he was older than he first appeared. Deep lines around his eyes, weather-worn skin, but with a dignity that hadn't quite been washed away by the rain. He winced and nodded, rubbing his elbow. "Just a bit clumsy, I suppose," he muttered with an embarrassed smile. Lena gently took his arm. "Let's get you into a booth. You're soaked." Ignoring the curious glances from customers and co-workers alike, she led him to a corner booth near the heater. She returned moments later with a clean towel and a fresh mug of coffee. "No charge," she said. "You need something warm." The man blinked, surprised. "You don't even know who I am." "I don't have to," Lena replied, already walking away to fetch another towel. "You're here and you need help." Behind the counter, another waitress whispered to the bartender, Who even does that anymore? The man sat silently watching her from his corner. He sipped the coffee, wrapped the towel around his shoulders, and for a while simply observed. Lena didn't look back at him again. She went on with her tasks, resetting tables, wiping menus, folding napkins with precise care. But every few minutes her eyes would dart discreetly toward the booth, just to make sure he was okay. When she passed his table again, he spoke. "I'm Edward." She paused, offering a small nod. "Lena." "Thank you, Lena." She gave him the faintest smile in return before disappearing into the kitchen. That night, Edward sat longer than necessary. He watched the rhythms of the restaurant, the way Lena worked. There was something rare in her movements, humility without submission, care without performance. She wasn't serving for tips or recognition or praise. She simply cared. And for Edward, that meant everything. As the staff began to close up and the lights dimmed, Lena approached him once more. "Do you have somewhere to go?" she asked gently. "I'll manage," he said, rising slowly. She nodded again, offering one last towel for the road. "Take this." He took it, then glanced back at her. "You're different from the others." "I just do my job." Edward smiled. "Not quite, but thank you." He left without another word, his steps still slightly unsure. Lena watched him disappear into the dark, stormy night. She didn't know it yet, but that moment, those 7 minutes of quiet kindness, had already changed everything. The following morning the sky had cleared, but puddles still clung to the pavement like forgotten echoes of the storm. The air had turned crisp, and the city seemed freshly scrubbed by the downpour. At Willow and Hearth, the usual morning hum was returning, the scent of freshly ground coffee, sizzling bacon from the back kitchen, and the occasional hiss of the espresso machine. Lena arrived early, as always. She preferred the quiet of the pre-opening hours, the stillness before the clamor of orders, clinking plates, and rushing feet. She wiped down the booths with rhythmic care, occasionally glancing out the window at the world waking up. Last night's events played over in her mind: the fall, the stranger, his kind but weary eyes. She hadn't asked for his story, and he hadn't offered it, but something about him lingered in her thoughts. Mid-morning, just as the brunch crowd began to swell, the door opened again, and there he was, Edward. He was drier today, dressed in an old wool coat and a flat cap pulled low over his brow. He moved slower than most customers, his gait cautious, as if unsure he belonged. Lena spotted him immediately. Without hesitation, she stepped forward. "Welcome back," she said softly, guiding him toward the same booth he'd sat in the night before. "You remembered," he smiled, settling into the seat with a sigh. "I remember kindness," she replied. He studied her for a moment, almost startled by her answer. Then he chuckled. "Not many do these days." As Lena fetched him coffee and a breakfast menu, the staff took notice again. The same man from the night before. Some made quiet jokes, assuming he was a lonely pensioner looking for attention. A few rolled their eyes, but Lena didn't care. Her focus was on him. "Do you work every shift?" Edward asked when she returned. "Almost," she replied, pouring his coffee. "It helps keep things steady." "Steady is good," he nodded. "So many chase noises." Their eyes met for a moment, an understanding passing between them. Two people used to the background, used to observing more than speaking. Lena didn't press him. She didn't ask why he'd returned. She simply brought him his order, checked on him when needed, and left him be. What she didn't notice was how his eyes followed more than the food. Edward watched the restaurant, The way it moved, how the staff interacted. His gaze lingered longest on Lena, the way she held herself, the grace in small tasks, the subtle ways she helped without drawing attention. He saw it when she noticed an elderly woman struggling to read the menu and offered to read it aloud. He noticed how she knelt to tie a child's shoe while clearing the table, and how she slipped $1 from her own tip jar into the hands of a struggling busboy. None of it loud, none of it for show. Edward sipped his coffee and smiled. This was why he'd come. It had been 3 days since Edward first stumbled into the restaurant, and he had returned each day since. Each time, Lena welcomed him with a quiet warmth that never wavered. She didn't treat him like a customer out of place, and she didn't press him for details he wasn't ready to share. The others were beginning to whisper. "Old man must be lonely," said Sandra, one of the weekend servers. "Bet he's got no one waiting at home." "Maybe he just likes Lena," joked another. "Can you blame him?" Lena ignored the comments. Edward had become a part of her daily rhythm now. She looked forward to his presence, not because he brought big tips or excitement, but because there was something soothing in his quiet appreciation. Unlike most customers, Edward never made demands. He simply sat, observed, and occasionally shared small pieces of himself. On that third visit, he asked, "What made you stay here?" Lena hesitated before answering. "I needed something stable. My mom's health isn't great, and college, well, that's on pause for now." "You wanted more?" he asked. "I still do," she admitted. "What's your dream, Lena?" She looked surprised at the question. Most people didn't ask. "Nursing," she said finally. "Always wanted to help people. I guess waiting tables is the closest I get for now." Edward didn't respond immediately. He simply looked at her with thoughtful eyes, then nodded. "You're helping more than you know." When the cook forgot Edward's toast, Lena slipped into the kitchen and quietly made it herself. When she noticed his hands trembling slightly, she brought over a cup with a lid and straw without a word. These were things no one else noticed. That night, as the restaurant emptied again and the staff began cleaning, Edward stayed until closing. Lena approached him with a soft smile. "Same time tomorrow?" He smiled, tipping his cap. "You bet." As she watched him leave once more, she still didn't know the weight her kindness carried. But Edward did. The days blurred together as they often did in the restaurant world. One morning, one rush, one shift bleeding into the next. But ever since Edward had started showing up, Lena's routine felt less like a grind and more like a quiet purpose. He had taken to sitting at the same booth every time, booth 6 near the heater, with a good view of the dining room. And each day he sat a little longer, watched a little closer. Edward had spent decades in hospitality. He had once built restaurants from nothing, managed staff, oversaw expansions, made hard calls. But years ago he had stepped back, retired in name but not in spirit. He still believed that a restaurant was more than a business. It was a living, breathing thing, a place where human connection mattered most. And what he saw now broke his heart. The manager barely left the back office. The staff, though capable, often bickered or looked exhausted. Customers were rushed, complaints shrugged off. No one truly smiled except Lena. She was an anomaly. Edward kept notes in a small leather-bound book. Lena noticed a customer with a limp, offered to move to the front table without making it obvious. Brought free coffee to job interview candidates nervously rehearsing in the corner. Spoke gently to a child having a meltdown, calmed him with paper napkin art. No manager had trained her for this. No handbook taught this kind of care. It came from who she was. One afternoon, Edward lingered after Lena's shift ended. He watched her gather her coat, pause to help a dishwasher with English homework, and leave with her head down, disappearing into the dusk. The next day he made a call. It was time. Lena began to notice the pattern. Edward wasn't just a random customer anymore. He was becoming a fixture in the quiet fabric of Willow and Hearth. Every day between 10:30 and 11 a.m., he arrived without fail. Always to the same booth, always greeted with the same small smile from her, and always ordering the same simple meal: 2 eggs, dry toast, black coffee. He never brought a book, never checked his phone. Instead, he sat like a watchman at sea, quiet, steady, eyes scanning the horizon of the dining room. The whispers among staff grew louder. "Creepy how he just sits there," muttered Brian, a cook with a sharp tongue and little patience. "I think he's lonely," said Sandra. "Keeps looking at Lena like she's the only person in the world." "Maybe he's a retired detective or something," joked Arjun, the part-time busser. "Or an inspector." Lena never fed into it. She knew what it was like to be misunderstood, to be seen only in fragments. People looked at Edward and saw wrinkles, odd behavior, mystery. She saw a man trying to find something, maybe comfort, maybe quiet. One day, as Lena was refilling his coffee, she asked, "What do you do, Edward?" He smiled, swirling his cup. "Used to run things, big things. Now I just observe." She tilted her head, curious. "Restaurants?" "Among others, but yes, I've spent a lot of time in places like this." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't push. But behind his calm demeanor, Edward was taking mental notes of everything. How the restaurant functioned, who slacked off, who cut corners, who treated customers like transactions. He saw the inefficiencies, the late deliveries, the broken light above booth 9 that had gone unrepaired for 2 weeks. He watched the manager bark orders from behind a laptop, rarely touching the floor, and he watched Lena carry the weight of every shift with invisible strength. The more he saw, the more convinced he became. This place needed someone like her, someone who treated people like people. That night, Edward didn't leave when the last customer paid their bill. He stayed, sipping the dregs of his coffee while Lena began wiping down tables. "You always close?" he asked gently. Lena nodded. "Morning to night most days." He leaned back, eyes scanning her face. "You deserve better." She gave a soft smile. "Maybe, but for now I'm grateful to have work." Edward said nothing else that evening, but he walked out with a decision firm in his mind. Tomorrow, he will start changing things. The following Monday began like any other, until the manager called a surprise all-staff meeting during the afternoon lull. "Everyone floor side now," barked Mr. Callahan, the general manager. He was not well liked. His leadership style leaned toward neglect, punctuated by sharp reprimands. But today, he seemed nervous, sweaty. The staff gathered in a loose half-circle near the bar, exchanging curious glances. Lena arrived last, wiping her hands on her apron. Callahan cleared his throat. "We have a guest today, a special guest." From behind him, Edward stepped forward. The room fell into stunned silence. Some staff blinked in disbelief. Others looked openly confused. "This is Mr. Edward Thomas," Callahan continued. He's the majority shareholder in Willow and Hearth's parent company. In other words, he owns this place, not just this location, the whole chain." The silence thickened into shock. Edward gave a small wave, then stepped fully into view. "Good afternoon," he said. "I know this is a surprise. I apologize for the secrecy, but I wanted to see this place for myself, without filters, without pretense. Whispers broke out like sparks among the staff. "You've been sitting in that booth for weeks," Sandra whispered to Arjun. "I thought he was a food critic," Arjun muttered back. Edward raised a hand to silence them. "This isn't about me. This is about what I've seen." His eyes scanned the staff slowly, finally resting on Lena. "I came here pretending to be just another customer, and while many of you were polite, professional, and capable, only one person treated me like a human being when I needed help the most. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't wait for someone else to move. She acted out of instinct, out of kindness." Everyone turned to look at Lena, who stood frozen in place. "That person," Edward continued, "is Lena." A beat of stunned silence. "I slipped, fell. No one moved. But Lena, she ran to help me, not knowing anything about me, not for attention, just because it was the right thing to do." Lena's face flushed with embarrassment. "I was just doing my job." "No," Edward said with quiet certainty. "You were doing something far greater." He turned to Callahan. "Effective immediately, Lena is being promoted to assistant manager with a significant pay increase, and the company will fund her nursing school tuition, full ride." Gasps. A few scattered claps. Then an explosion of chatter. Lena stood there stunned. I can't." "You already did," Edward said simply. The next day, the energy inside Willow and Hearth felt completely different. Staff whispered in hallways. Customers peered more curiously than usual. And Lena, newly promoted, reluctantly celebrated, found herself at the center of a story she never asked for. "I always knew there was something about her," Sandra told a table of regulars with theatrical flair. "Do you think she knew he was the owner?" someone asked. "She's not like that," Arjun cut in. "Lena doesn't play games." But the mood wasn't all supportive. By lunch, Lena noticed small changes. Cold shoulders from co-workers she used to joke with, shift schedules rearranged without her input, and side comments that sting more than they should have. "Assistant manager now, huh?" Brian muttered while tossing plates into the dishwasher. "Guess all it takes is saving a rich guy." Lena tried to laugh it off. "It wasn't like that." But the undercurrent of jealousy was real. Promotions didn't usually happen overnight, and certainly not with tuition packages attached. Some saw it as favoritism, others as manipulation. Lena chose the high road. She didn't gloat and didn't change how she treated anyone. She still helped with side work, still asked about people's weekends, still covered shifts without complaint. Edward noticed the tension too. Over coffee that afternoon, he said gently, "People will always resent what they don't understand." Lena sighed. "I didn't do anything special. That's what makes it so special," he replied. But Lena was determined not to let the attention change her. That evening, she organized a small team meeting. No announcements, no speeches, just pizza, laughs, and listening. She thanked them for everything they'd taught her. She asked for feedback. She made it clear that this was still their team. And slowly, the tension began to melt. Not because she demanded respect, but because she showed grace. And quietly, once again, Lena turned the tide. Not with force, but with compassion. The buzz from the announcement hadn't faded. Every day brought someone new to Willow and Hearth. Regulars, curious strangers, even bloggers who'd heard about the waitress turned manager by the secret owner. It sounded like a fairy tale. To Lena, it still felt unreal. And yet there she was, wearing a new name tag, stepping into new responsibilities. The change wasn't in the title alone. Lena was now responsible for inventory, scheduling, even mediating staff conflicts. She still bussed tables when needed, still swept the floor after close. Her heart hadn't changed. Only her role had. But that wasn't the only transformation happening. On a crisp Wednesday morning, Edward returned once again, but this time not alone. A sharply dressed woman accompanied him, Margot Lynn, the company's regional director. She had an air of authority and curiosity, clipboard tucked under her arm and a camera crew trailing behind. Callahan, the general manager, looked blindsided. He scrambled to straighten his tie, barking hushed orders to the barista and wiping sweat from his brow. Lena, calm as ever, met Edward at the door. "You brought company today," she smiled. "They needed to see it," Edward replied, offering a wink. "The heart of what this place could be." Margot was all business at first, touring the kitchen, asking questions, checking the condition of equipment. But as the hours passed, she too noticed the subtle magic Lena brought. The way she spoke to a crying toddler with such gentleness, the mother teared up in gratitude. How she knelt beside an elderly couple struggling with the new digital menu and walked them through it like a patient friend. By the end of lunch, Margot pulled Edward aside. "You were right," she said. "She's a unicorn." Edward grinned. "No, she's just what we all forget to look for." That afternoon, Margot held a short meeting with the entire staff. It was brief but impactful. "Due to what we've witnessed, this location will now serve as a flagship for the chain's new People First model," she announced. "Lena will assist in training other stores on this model, starting next quarter. We'll also be investing in staff development here, because this place and this team is worth building on." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then genuine. Even Callahan managed a tight smile, though it was clear the spotlight had shifted away from him entirely. Later that day, Edward approached Lena near the register. "You didn't just earn a promotion," he said. "You've changed the company." Lena blinked, overwhelmed. "I just wanted to help." "That's the difference," Edward said. "And why do people like you need to lead?" Lena's story began to travel beyond the restaurant's walls. A local news outlet ran a piece titled, "Kindness at the Counter: How a Waitress Became a Company Hero." Photos of Lena and Edward appeared on community boards, and soon, invitations for speaking events started rolling in. She declined most of them. Lena had never wanted fame. Recognition made her uneasy, but she agreed to one event, a leadership forum hosted at the local community college. It was being held at the same school where she once dreamed of attending nursing classes before life and bills got in the way. When Lena stepped onto the stage, the lights felt too bright. Her voice shook at first, but then she saw Edward seated in the front row, smiling like a proud mentor. "I never expected anything," she began. "I just believe that when someone falls, literally or otherwise, you help them up. You don't need a title for that." The auditorium erupted in applause. Afterward, a young woman approached her, eyes shining. "I'm in the nursing program here, your story. It reminded me why I chose this path." Lena smiled, her heart swelling. "Then it's already worth it." Back at Willow and Hearth, the change was visible. Morale lifted. Staff who once seemed disconnected now stayed late to talk about ideas for improving service. A kindness wall appeared near the host stand, where customers could write notes of gratitude to employees. Lena encouraged everyone, not just managers, to lead in small ways, welcoming new hires with handwritten notes, celebrating birthdays with homemade cupcakes, suggesting customer care improvements. And her staff, once skeptical, began to see her not as a favorite or a fluke, but as a real leader. Even Brian, the dishwasher who had once doubted her, came up one night during cleanup. "You proved us wrong," he muttered, "in a good way." Lena smiled. "We're in it together." But success, no matter how heartfelt, never comes without shadows. As Willow and Hearth's story spread, not everyone was thrilled. Other managers in the company, those who had worked for years without ever meeting Edward or receiving special attention, started murmuring about favoritism. In a private corporate Slack channel, one manager wrote, "So I guess all it takes now is helping an old man off the floor, and you get tuition and a press feature." Another chimed in, "I've been managing for 8 years. No raise, no TV cameras. Where's my people first feature?" The backlash made its way to Lena, albeit secondhand. "Don't take it personally," Edward said when she mentioned it. "The world has a hard time celebrating what it doesn't understand." Still, Lena couldn't ignore the weight. She didn't want to be seen as someone who jumped the line. She wanted to be respected for what she gave, not what she received. So she responded the only way she knew how, with action. Lena wrote a public letter to all staff. In the company newsletter, it read, in part, "I didn't earn this alone. Every act of care, every coworker who took on an extra shift, every host who greeted with a smile, every cook who stayed close, shaped the culture we're now being recognized for. I was lucky to be seen. My promise is to make sure others are too." She offered to lead mentorship programs, asked to rotate visits to other branches, even volunteered to train new assistant managers herself. In response, some of the criticism softened. A few emails came in, quiet thank yous from managers at distant branches. But perhaps the biggest shift came internally. Her own staff, seeing her handle backlash with humility, stood by her more firmly than ever. "Some people get bitter when the spotlight hits," Arjun said. "You just use it to shine on everyone else." Lena shrugged, grinning. Lights aren't meant for just one person. If the first weeks after Lena's promotion were marked by uncertainty and whispers, the months that followed proved transformative. Under her new leadership, Willow and Hearth began to feel different. Warmer, not just to customers, but to those who worked within its walls. Lena didn't step into her role with bravado or managerial distance. She didn't sit in the back office like her predecessor. Instead, she lived her leadership out on the floor, refilling drinks, sweeping up crumbs, celebrating quiet victories. She introduced small but meaningful changes, a rotating staff spotlight board, where every team member had a week to share their story, a happiness budget, a modest fund to surprise employees on birthdays or hard days. She adjusted scheduling to allow for real rest and time off, something that had long been neglected. For the first time, staff started taking pride in their roles. One afternoon, during a particularly busy Sunday brunch, a regular customer stopped Lena near the espresso bar. "I don't know what's changed here," she said, "but I feel it. People smile more. Even the food tastes better." Lena chuckled. Kindness can be a secret ingredient. Word spread beyond customers, too. The company's headquarters sent down 2 new managers to shadow her and her team. They expected to find a novel system or secret playbook. What they found was simpler and harder. A culture built on empathy. Team cohesion grew stronger. Turnover dropped. Customer reviews surged. Even Callahan, once skeptical and stiff, found himself asking Lena for advice. But what truly cemented Lena's legacy wasn't just the operational turnaround. It was how she helped others rise with her. When Brian, the once cynical dishwasher, mentioned he wanted to get his GED, Lena found a local night program and helped him apply. When Sandra's mother got sick, Lena quietly covered several of her shifts and sent groceries home through a community fund she'd set up with Edward's backing. By lifting others, Lena didn't just transform a restaurant, she transformed lives. And she still didn't ask for credit. As she often said, the strongest roots grow underground. 2 years later, the calendar flipped to May, and spring bloomed across the city in bright, defiant colors. It was Lena's graduation day. The nursing school auditorium buzzed with nervous energy. Students adjusted their gowns, families filled rows with cameras and bouquets. But Lena stood quietly backstage, holding her cap, her eyes scanning the crowd for one face. He was there, of course. Edward Thomas, in his usual wool coat and flat cap, front and center. His hair had gone a little whiter, his gait slower, but his smile had never looked more proud. As her name was called, Lena walked across the stage to thunderous applause. She accepted her diploma with trembling fingers and glanced toward Edward, who gave her a thumbs up and wiped a tear she pretended not to notice. Later that afternoon, a small celebration was held at Willow and Hearth. The team had decorated the dining room with white lights and handmade cards. Arjun played soft guitar in the corner, and the host's stand displayed a chalkboard reading, "From Table to Triumph. Congrats, Nurse Lena." During a toast, Edward stood and gently clinked his glass. "Many of us think legacy comes from building empires," he said. "But true legacy, real, lasting impact, comes from the lives we touch, one by one. Lena reminded me of that." Lena's eyes glistened. "You gave me a chance." He shook his head. "You gave it meaning." That night she stayed long after the others left. Sitting at her old booth, booth 6, she remembered that rainy night. The fall, the stranger, the moment that changed everything, and she whispered to the empty room, "Thank you." Months passed. Life moved forward. Lena now worked part-time as a nurse at a local clinic and part-time overseeing training and community outreach for Willow and Hearth. Her worlds overlapped more than she expected, both rooted in care, both driven by the small moments of kindness. She hadn't seen Edward in a few weeks. He had taken a trip, he'd said, something about visiting old partners and seeing what else in the world still needed mending. But she knew he'd return. He always did. One rainy afternoon, as she walked into the restaurant to check on scheduling, Lena noticed a figure outside, standing at the threshold. A young man, barely in his 20s, soaked from head to toe, shivering. His hands trembled as he tried to open the door, but he hesitated. His backpack was torn, his clothes threadbare, and something in his eyes mirrored desperation. Lena moved without hesitation. She opened the door gently. "Come in, you're safe." He looked startled. "I don't have money." "I didn't ask for any," she smiled. "Let's get you warm." She led him to booth 6. The hostess raised an eyebrow. "Want me to call security?" Lena shook her head. "No, bring him some coffee, maybe soup." She returned a few minutes later with a towel, a dry shirt someone had left behind, and a plate of food. "You work here?" the young man asked cautiously. "I used to serve tables. Now I do a little of everything." "Why?" "Because someone once helped me and I never forgot." He stared at her silent. and for a moment Lena saw a spark in him, not gratitude exactly, but hope, the first flicker of something that might grow. She smiled again. "Eat up," she said, "then we'll figure out the rest." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but inside Willow and Hearth, warmth had returned, soft, steady, and deeply rooted in the legacy of one quiet act of kindness, the kind that changes everything.